Welcome to this week's episode of How Things Work on Let's Talk Automotive. And in today's episode, what we're going to do is we're going to actually take some advice that we got from one of our viewers last year when we threw it out to ask viewers what they wanted to see on How Things Work. And Emma Renscher Geldenhuys gave us a fantastic suggestion and said, why don't you tell us things that would be pertinent to ladies? And so we're going to do exactly that today. And we're going to start off with our first episode on things that are practical for ladies, and that's going to be how to change a tire. So we've got Leandra with us today. So welcome, Leandra.
I'm going to get my hands dirty.
You're going to get your hands dirty, and we're going to put you to the test, and we're going to show you the right way to change a tire. Okay. So first things first is I want you to try and undo one of the wheel nuts.
Okay.
Okay, so you know that it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
All right, so lefty-loosey and... all right.
No.
So quite difficult.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So one of the suggestions that we've got for you is if you do find yourself in a situation where you really can't undo the wheel nuts, I've got a little tip for you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put the wheel spanner in that position, so it's going to undo it. And then what I want you to do is very carefully, while still bracing yourself on the vehicle, start putting your weight onto that wheel spanner.
Okay.
And let's see if you can undo it now.
Oh my word.
Remember to support yourself on the car so that you don't slip off when that thing loosens up. Now you can jump on it. There we go. Now you've undone that particular wheel nut. Okay, so well done. You've managed to loosen up the wheel nut. And of course we can loosen up all the wheel nuts. But remember that you loosen the wheel nuts before you jack up the vehicle, because otherwise when the wheel's up in the air, it's going to start turning the wheel. Especially if it's the front or if you've got a very weak handbrake. Okay. So we normally just unnip all the wheel nuts just slightly. We don't take them off the vehicle just yet. We just nip them so that they're nice and loose before we jack up the vehicle. All right. Now, the second thing is that we're going to be getting on our knees, and this is a nice rough surface.
Yeah.
If you're on the side of the road, you might find that there's little rocks and little stones. It's going to hurt your knees, and you potentially could be on dirt and sand and you're going to get dirty. So here's a little trick that I always show people, and that is, before you start working on replacing anything, we can use our cover in our boot.
Oh, that's very clever.
And we can now lean on that.
Yeah.
And now we don't hurt our knees and we keep ourselves clean.
Very clever, Pete.
All right. Second thing is we need to be very sure about where we jack up the vehicle.
Okay.
Because there's only two brace points on the rear and the front that are strong enough to cope with the weight of the vehicle.
Okay.
All right, so we've got the Scissor Jack, as this is called, and if we look under the vehicle over here, and Fani will come and show this separately, there are two ways that we can identify the jacking points. The first is that there is a little arrow that's imprinted on this rocker plate over here, or you can, if you have a look, see that it is a very strong point that stands proud from the rest of that rocker, and we're going to simply slide our jack into that position, and just by hand we can wind it up, make sure it seats nicely. Now there's two other things that we're going to do which we would recommend that you do, which we're not going to do now.
Okay.
But if your vehicle is on a bit of a slope, make sure that your handbrake is on tight, your vehicle is in first gear. If possible, try find a rock or a brick or something that can act as a wheel chock that you can put behind the wheel to stop the wheel from rolling. Because as soon as we pick up this vehicle, we're going to change the angle and it might roll away from us. Okay, right, now we're going to jack this up. So obviously we have quite a neat little trick that we can do here with our wheel spanner. So we take this, put it through here, and we can now use it to simply jack up the vehicle. Right, now we don't have to go too high off the ground. So as soon as there's a little bit of clearance, like we can see on that tyre there, we can stop jacking up. And the reason for that is that if you have a very heavy tyre, so if you've got a very big car and a very heavy tyre, you don't want to have to do too much lifting to try and put that tyre into its position. All right, so now we've jacked up the tyre, we've loosened the wheel nuts, we can start taking everything off. Now what you might find is that if a tyre or a wheel has been on its wheel hub for a long time, that it's sticky and very difficult to get off. So if you do find yourself in that situation, it's quite weird because it feels like you haven't taken the nuts off.
Yeah.
What you can do, I'm not going to do it too hard on this, is you stand with your back to the vehicle and you give the wheel a good kick, but backwards. So on the tyre itself, you give it a nice sharp kick, and that'll loosen up the wheel enough that it will physically come off. Okay. This one's nice and loose. Okay, so we can take this away. And now what I'm going to show you is, again, we're lucky with the Suzuki. We've got a very nice light mini spare. You might find yourself in a situation where you've got a very heavy tyre and it's difficult for you to lift up this tyre. So what you can do is you can use your legs as a scissor lift, because we've got a lot of strength in those legs. So what we do is we put the tyre on our legs and we can lift
Lift it up, yeah.
the tyre like that. But in this case it's nice and light, so we can put our tyre on nice and easily, and we can now put on the wheel nuts. Alright, now when we put the wheel nuts on, there is a specific order in which we need to tighten them up. So, common mistake that people make when they're tightening up their wheel nuts is that they tighten them up in order. If you do that, what happens is that the actual rim doesn't seat properly, and as you tighten one nut up, it loosens up the other. So we've got to tighten our nuts up in opposite order. So let's just quickly nip these up quickly. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Right, so if I tighten this one up tight, the very next one I do is the one opposite it. Can you see I've moved the rim there? Okay. Alright, so now I tighten that up. Then I tighten this one. And now I do the opposite one. You see I've moved the wheel there. So that's what's happening. So we tighten the opposite one up. Okay. And we keep doing that. So we do the opposite. Right. So that's tight enough for us to now drop the vehicle down. Let's give you a turn at now reducing or dropping the vehicle down. So lefty loosey. So we're going to go. That's it. Alright, so you can cup your hand like that. Okay, perfect. And you should be able to slide that out just by hand. Maybe loosen it up a bit more. Lefty loosey. Alright, you can pull that out now. And now it's time to tighten up the wheel nuts.
Okay.
Alright, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to make the following suggestion. One of the mistakes that we make is we over tighten our wheel nuts. Now remember, the wheel nuts, the thread itself will stretch if we over tighten it, and then we damage it and we run the danger that the wheels fall off at a later stage. Okay, so what I want you to do is let's put the wheel spanner on in the correct position so that we're going to be tightening it, and all I want you to do is push down with your upper body weight as hard as you can and no more. Okay, that's it. Right, now we go to the opposite nut.
It's this one.
Yeah. Put it in place, push down as hard as you can. That's it. Now you go to the other nut. That's it, push down as hard as you can. And then the last one. And that's enough. Okay, that is tight enough, it's safe, those nuts are not going to come off, and you're good to go after we've packed up. Right.
Okay.
One last thing to remember, please, is that the probability is excellent that when we've changed the wheel, our wheel hub is still hot. And so are the studs and the nuts. They're warm, which means they've expanded.
Yeah.
Which means that when we park the car tonight and everything cools down, everything's going to contract and these are going to loosen up a little bit.
Yeah, so you must tighten it the next morning.
So the next morning, just make sure you go back to your car and just nip those nuts again.
Okay.
And everything's good.
Thank you, Pete.
That's a great pleasure. Okay, so there you see it. A couple of things to check, obviously, is to make sure, first of all, especially if you've bought your vehicle second-hand, that this is the correct spare wheel, that it fits on, that you've got your jack, that you've got your spanner, and you're good to go if you break down on the side of the road. So we hope you found that useful, and you can see that it's actually not too bad to change your tire at the end of the day if you do it the right way. And we look forward to seeing you on future episodes of How Things Work.